Good afternoon. I'm David Ward with Mecum Auctions. Very happy to be in Monterey this week for Monterey Car Week. We have a very special kind of outing for you today to learn about the design, the development of a one-of-one concept car that, to my left, Chris Theodore was instrumental in not only designing but engineering and building with a colleague and a gentleman named Carol Shelby. So today what I'd like to do is have Chris talk about all the project and all the things that were involved with the development of the car, but also some of the history of what the car means in the automobile world, but just as important as in your history, Chris, because we're talking to auto tech students. And those auto tech students are going to be ones that hopefully will replace you and me in the future of the car world, but doing something that's going to inspire them. So today might be a lesson to say, you know what, I want to do that. Or maybe some things that you talk about that are jobs that they might be able to take over at a company like Ford Motor Company or something else. But Chris was a former director of product development at Ford Motor Company and has a wonderful backstory. And I just want to turn it over to you and let you tell your whole story.
Well, hopefully we've got a lot of budding car guys out there in video land here. I too, many years ago, was struck by a love of cars at the age of 4 or 5. My dad caught me jacking up his 51 Plymouth to change his spare tire when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I used to sketch cars, and I worked on cars, and I wanted to be a designer. Design cars because I sketched them, but as fortune would happen, I ended up being good at math and science and went on to become an engineer. And I love cars as you probably do growing up. The favorite cars you'd see were the Shelby 427 Cobra, the Ford GT, Jaguar XKE were the kind of cars that really made me excited and the kind of cars I wanted to do. And through a lot of good fortune and through a lot of hard work, I had the good fortune to work on many cars at both Chrysler and Ford Motor Company and other companies as well. But from things as mundane to redesigning a minivan, to the PT Cruiser, to Viper and PT and Plymouth Prowler. And then when I moved to Ford, the first thing we did was Ford GT, and then the Cobra concept and the new Mustang. Because I was a car fan, I was also a fan of racing, and I was a fan of when Americans finally beat Ferrari, as many of you probably seen the movie, at Le Mans. And I switched my little slot cars from Ferraris to Fords, and Carol Shelby was one of my idols as a kid. The great thing that happened is I got to know Carol. First met him when we were working on the Viper. I was working on the V10 engine. And later on, we got Carol to come back to Ford Motor Company, where he'd started out with the Shelby GT350 Mustangs and the Cobras and the Daytonas, and then ran the Mans program. So he was my idol, and then to get to meet him and work with him was really fascinating. So we brought him in. We started to work with him in 2005 Ford GT, and the next thing, once you did the Ford GT, the next thing was to try and do a modern interpretation of the Cobra, the 427 Cobra. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And the funny thing is my team designed and developed the car we're going to show you, the 2004 Shelby Cobra concept. And through some very good fortune, about 4 years ago, I had the chance to acquire the car and get it running again. But let's swing around for a second. So the inspiration is probably every kid's favorite car. The most copied race car in the world is a 427 Cobra, and behind it you see a GT350 Mustang that won all the races in SCCA. Now, if you look at that Cobra, it's an unmistakable car. And how do you create a modern version without it being retro? And we wanted to pay homage to the greatness of that car, but we didn't want it to look like yesterday's car, because that would be cartoonish. So you've got the big mouth. The toughest challenge is the round headlights. And look at the voluptuous hips on the rear fenders that just kept getting bigger and bigger as Carol kept putting fatter and fatter tires on the car. Notice the windscreen is separate, the long hood. So we tried to pick up some of the flavor of Cobra without repeating Cobra and making a new one. So we'll come back around to this car. So working with the designers, again, I was head of engineering, working with the designers, the oval grill, you still had to have a huge grill that looked like it's going to eat you in your rearview mirror, but notice it's flat at the bottom. Note that the headlamps have changed because you can't have a modern car, can't have headlamps sticking out, so they're covered and faired back. Still long hood. And you'll see other little details. Notice the vertical bumperettes. They mimic the bumpers that were on the 427 Cobra. Of course, the Cobra had a hood scoop, and this car has a hood scoop. Now let's walk around the side a little bit. And again, without repeating the huge fenders, the tires are just bursting out from the car. It's almost like the skin was laid over the mechanicals of the car. And this car has a V10 engine, 605 horsepower, that I'll show you in a second. These huge tires, the transmission's in the rear. And we tried to get the flavor from the side view of the Shelby. Notice that the windshield is separate, held by A-pillars. And of course, back in the day, Shelbys didn't have headrests. So this car, we created kind of roll bar headrests behind the carbon fiber wheels. And if you get back to the rear, we didn't show you the rear of the 427 Cobra, but this car has, the 427 Cobra has a beautiful butt. This car has a beautiful butt. And again, you see the overriders. You see a modern version of the twin stack tail lamps you see on a 427. And then to keep it modern, you see a vortex generator underneath the rear of the car for modern aerodynamics. And it's quite a project, quite a homage. Now the neat thing is we did this car from beginning to end in cooperation with Carol. So it started with sketches. For those who want to be designers, like I want to be a designer but never became one, I still sketch cars day in and day out. Started with that sketch, went into clay modeling. Meanwhile, I got my engineering team involved and said, we want this car to go into production after the Ford GT. And so we engineered the entire chassis, which I'll show you some of the bits and pieces. Let me talk a little bit about the inside. 427 Cobra was a very basic car. It had no side windows, and the designers worked hard to just have a very simplistic, simple dash. Wanted everything to be like a 427. None of this, electronic gizmos. Manual shift. You really feel this car when you drive it. So I'm going to go around the other side. You can stay right here for a second. So I told the team we're going to engineer the car. This car is going to be the prototype for the production car. So concept cars normally do not get engineered. So let me open the surprise. So what we have here is an all aluminum V10 engine, double overhead can, 4-valve, dry sump lubrication, one of 4 in the world. This car is one of 1 in the world. It is the last Shelby Cobra. But take a look at the structure around it. We reused the suspension that was off the Ford GT in the front, modified and tuned, of course, for the Cobra. But the entire front structure was all made out of billet aluminum. And if you're studying mechanics, or if you want to be a fabricator, just look at the work. This car was designed, built, engineered in-house by the whole team. Fabricators, designers, clay modelers, the guys who made the body, and the guys who milled out all these aluminum components. So we've got double overhead cam V10, cooling system up front. Now the interesting thing about the car is Carol and I decided to put the transaxle in the rear of the car, because if you've ever driven an old Cobra, 427 or 289 Cobra, there's no room for your feet. You sit crooked in the car and your feet get nice and toasty warm. In this car with the transmission in the rear, 6-7 footer can sit in this car with comfort. It's got the same interior space as an old Crown Victoria Ford. So we reused parts, we engineered the whole vehicle, we hoped to put it into production, and unfortunately it never came to pass because the economy turned sour and we never got the program approved. Now, a dream for me, this was one of my dream cars to work on, this and the Ford GT. And the dream of it all is that 4 years ago, Ford Motor Company never, ever, ever sells their premium concept cars, but they wanted to raise money for a charity auction for the restoration of the Henry Ford Mansion in Dearborn, Michigan. And for legal purposes, they had to disable the car so it wouldn't run. But guess what? I and my old team had all the blueprints and everything. I spent too much money. I went to the charity auction, but we've got it running. It runs great. It's been on, you can watch it on Jay Leno's garage. We've had it out at the track. I take it out to the car shows. People love it. It's a piece of history. It's the last Shelby Cobra. It's the only one in the world. And hopefully it's an inspiration for you, because I still have another dozen cars that I want to design in my head. Hopefully you have some too. Carol and I were working on several other projects, and I hope to complete those. So that's pretty much the story of the Shelby Cobra concept. I hope it inspires you. We used every skill needed. Like I said, sketching, clay modeling, mechanics, fabricators, engine engineers, chassis engineers, body designers, and lots of very good suppliers to build this very special, one-of-a-kind car. Carol loved it. He drove it at the racetrack for 2 straight days and had a ball doing it, and it won Best in Show when we introduced it at the Detroit Auto Show in 2004. So that's the story, and I hope you guys carry on the tradition of designing and building great cars.
So Chris, we've actually had a couple questions come in the process of the video. So can you speak a little bit about what was the greatest challenge you faced when this car was produced? I'm sure there was plenty of obstacles, but what would you say is the greatest challenge you guys ran into?
I think the greatest challenge for all of us is trying to do a modern car, a modern version of a Cobra. Thank God we were doing it with Carol, because when you try and recreate a legend, you don't want to tarnish the image of that legend. You want to create a new legend. And that was our goal with this car, and that was a big challenge, because it's not an easy thing to do.
And when you speak about, just obviously you were very involved with the whole process, but taking all the ideas that your team had and bringing them to life, I mean, how would you encourage a automotive student to maybe not consider those ideas and those thoughts to be too far-fetched, and encourage them to actually pursue them, to bring them to life?
Well, I think that's part of, as you grow up in the business of being a leader, you create an image for the team, and you say, we tell them what in general we want to do. I'll give you an example, not of the Cobra example. The team knew we wanted to do a modern version of Badass Cobra. Excuse my language. When we did the Ford GT, I got the entire team together. No offense to other car brands, but I said, I want you to imagine you're on Woodward Avenue. You're at a stoplight, a red exotic car pulls up next to you, and a guy revs his motor, and you look over at him, and you say, my car's faster than yours, it handles better than yours, it looks better than yours, and I didn't get ripped off. And that was the mantra for the Ford GT team. The goal for Cobra was the same thing. A bare bones, raw car that really required a skilled driver like Carroll Shelby, who's a world champion, to drive it properly. No fancy electronics, no traction control, none of that. Manual transmission, show me you know how to drive. That was the purpose of this car. And Carroll drove the wheels off it. He was at Irwindale, he was doing donuts in the car. We had a ball. And I've had a ball driving this car since I got it running again. I drove it at Irwindale too. Right. Any other questions?
Someone wants to know the car itself, since you've put it together, or since you've got it back running again, how many miles have you driven it?
It's probably, since we got it back together, probably only a few hundred miles, because it's so precious. You know, this is irreplaceable. It's 101 in the world. So I do take it out and I show up, but I'm very careful with it. I have some fun, I won't lie, but I don't push it to the extreme. But it's a riot to drive. I gotta tell you, the sound of the exhaust is incredible, and it handles very, very well.
Chris, I just want to interject. We're partnering in this group, in this event, with an organization called TechForce Foundation. And TechForce Foundation is Arizona-based, and they address the gap that exists between the auto tech industry at all levels and the education piece. And so they have a website called jointechforce.com that they, of course, want people to register on to learn more about how to get involved with those programs. You may have an experience, maybe as even a college professor, as an adjunct professor, or even as a visiting professor. What are some of the challenges that kids might have today dealing with what you grew up with in comparison?
Well, you know, the funny thing is as the world's grown, there's too much specialization. And so there's a gap. There's a gap between engineers and designers that I talked about. There's a gap between fabricators and engineers. Even CAD design don't work as close together with engineers. So there's all these gaps that need to be filled, and you need to be able to, only a car enthusiast can really bridge those gaps. So it takes a special type of mechanic to be able to talk to an engineer and say, that's stupid and this won't work because. And it takes an engineer to be able to say to the mechanic, we're doing it this way because it needs to do it for this and that particular reason. So there's fear of this education gap, but we have to fill all the holes, you know, from people who sketch the car, to the guys who work on cars, to body engineers, to chassis engineers, powertrain engineers, meld this all, CAD designers, meld it all into one. So the training is critical. And it's bridge. You don't have to be a rocket scientist in any one area. You need to have a team with all those skills represented that can communicate with each other. The most important thing is that they can talk to each other and understand each other.
So it's more of a collaboration kind of environment.
We did this car we did the Ford GT with about 30 guys, and we did this car with probably 15 guys on the chassis, and 15 guys in Dearborn, and 15 guys in the Valencia studio in California. Built the whole car, designed it, built it in 8 months, which is unheard of.
That's good. You mentioned guys. Were there women on the team? Are you seeing more women get involved?
That's happening, and it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. I've had a lot of great women engineers working for me, and women are great managers, and they get into a lot of nits. I've had women electrical engineers working for me. Women designers are fantastic. So the field is wide open for women. And they're coming on strong, guys, so you better hit the books. Hit the books too, because
They're coming.
the ladies are tenacious when it comes to this stuff, which is a good thing.
Well, I mean, they see some of that competition from the guys, and it used to be, well, this is their world, but you know what? I'm going to show how I can be prowess and the abilities.
Absolutely.
Good for them. So when Saturday comes, the car gets ready to cross the block. What's going through your head?
Well, tear in my eye, of course, because I wish I could afford to keep the car.
Sure.
But Carol and I were working on other projects.
Right.
So one of the projects is called Super Snake 2. It's about 80% done. And so I had to stop that project. Carol and I started it. I had to stop that project to get, this car's code name was Daisy, by the way,
Right.
to get the Shelby Cobra concept running again. So when I sell the Shelby Cobra concept, pay off my debts, and hopefully finish off Super Snake 2. And then there are a couple other projects I wrote about in the book that I hope to do. I may be dreaming, but that's
the fun of it, right?
Yep.
I mean, after an engineer does, and a designer, you,
I'm never
you
done.
create concepts.
Yes.
Okay, chasing dreams.
Exactly.
That's good. So when the car leaves, what is it you hope? Is there a place that is ideal in your mind as to I would like this car to go to, or a person, an individual that what would they do with this car?
Well, one, you hope they appreciate the history, that they're a great caretaker for the car. But this car wants to be driven. Carol would want it to be driven. It wants to be shown. When I show this car or take it out for a ride, or even people post videos of me driving it for a ride. I mean, I go for a ride, and the next thing I know, there's a video on YouTube. The car should be shown because people love this car. They see it, and they think it's still fresh, even though it's an 18-year-old design. Right. People come up to me and say, "Is it coming out tomorrow?" You know, and I said, "No," but.
And never.
Well, you never say never.
You never know. I respect that, of course. I agree with that. Yeah.
We would. Carol and I were working just before he passed and actually building some replicas of this car,
Okay.
and it just didn't come to pass. So
Understandable. That's good.
that's the story.
Very good. Phil, do we have any questions online that you're seeing? No? Okay.
They want to see the car.
They want to see more.
So we're going to show the car.
Yeah, they want to see more pics.
Come over on this side. Let me show you how just the designers did the door handle.
I was trying to get you.
Hello, my friend.
Hey, John, I'm just finishing up an interview. So, just the door is mechanical too. Push forward, because if you're going fast, you're going to pull rearward. So push forward and open the door. Very simple mechanism. Bare bones. Designers came up with it. Designers came up with headrests. So, a lot of cool features in this car. The kill switch, a nod to race cars. That's the big red button.
He gave me some of the facts.
You know, in case there's a fire or something in a race car, you always have the kill switch. The way the gauges are designed, they're all clocked correctly. The grip on the steering wheel, everything, and the cut down carbon fiber seats. So there's a lot to see.
Maybe you think
We put in some of the aerodynamic cues, the side splitters. If you look down here on the rocker panels, you know, Cobra's pretty flat-sided when it doesn't have the side exhaust, but these splitters here are actually for aerodynamic purposes. We put in barge boards, which were the thing in Formula One back in the day. So some of the heat goes through here, but the other air flowing from the brakes and tires gets exhausted on this side of the barge board. So a lot of little tricks. The Venturi to feed the 10-cylinder engine. So the air comes through, feeds through the engine, and feeds back through the log manifolds. And of course the trick power hood. We'll lower the hood again, you get another shot. Oh yeah, did you show him Carol's signature?
There it is, right there.
Okay. Do that little detail. Minor detail. We ran out of juice.
David Purvis or David who? Mike Baker. Okay, I'll check with him. Okay. Okay, video. Thanks.
Wrap it up.